Okay. I think we're ready to go ahead and go, Betsy.
All right, super. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the 802 United, yet another town hall. We do these virtual town halls once a month. And for September 21st, we've got a great and packed agenda. So we're going to get right to it. You have with you Julie Wilson, who is our board president. I'm the board secretary, which means I write stuff down. And our guests are phenomenal, and we're going to introduce them. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the 802 in general, who we are. We're a Kansas-based, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. And what we're about is education and awareness of Kansans regarding issues that affect all of us. We use the 3 V's, I almost said W, 3 V's method to make change we want to see in the world: voices, volunteering, and voting. So if you look at our page, you're going to see all kinds of things about ways that you can help, ways that you can volunteer, get out the vote, and make sure your voice is heard. Our mission statement: the 802 United values the people and opportunities available in Kansas. We strive to make our state a welcoming environment for all humans, utilizing principles that put community and purposeful kindness ahead of ideological extremism. Our organization fosters communication between organizations with similar ideals and provides a bridge or connection to support others to address problems in their community. We promote community action events and nonpartisan issue-based messages through our Facebook page and virtual town meetings, and coming soon, a website. Really, truly. All right, Julie, take it away with our first 2 guests.
Okay, our first 2 guests are 2 of my very good friends, very accomplished women. We have Vicki Jennings, and Vicki has a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from Emporia State University, as well as her building principal's license from Emporia State University. She is recently retired building principal. And actually last year, she substituted in an elementary special ed classroom. And Sarah is has a degree from Washburn. I had to ask her what kind of a degree she has, because she's kind of a jack of all trades. Sarah actually has a degree from Washburn University in mass media with a emphasis in, I can't even think. Public relations. Thank you. And she is the mother of a neurodivergent student who is on an IEP. So Vicki is going to share with us the process that it takes and the timelines that it takes in the general sense to get your child on an IEP. And then Sarah truly is a parent that comes to an IEP meeting very prepared, and she'll give you all some tips on how to make yourself prepared for an IEP meeting. So Vicki, you have the screen, go for it.
Oh my goodness. All right, well, hi everybody. Very quickly, a couple of housekeeping chores. I have a sheet of resources that Julie has. So if anybody's interested in that resource sheet, that has most of the documents I've pulled information from to confirm what I thought I already knew. Secondly, I want you to keep a key fact in mind. I'm only doing an overview. I saw this fact somewhere not too terribly long ago that said there are over 250 regulations in IDEA specifically for special ed. You can also figure that there are another 250 in the state, and then each district's co-op or an educational cooperative can change those within the law to fit the practices of their community. So when you figure there's so much to know, anytime I would say this to parents, anytime you're feeling frustrated, we use KSDE, we call the special ed office, we ask specifically, and we rely heavily on our SPED directors and special education coordinators who know that stuff inside and out. No reason to act like you do, and it's never a problem to tell a parent, I have to find out to be sure. So keeping those 2 things in mind, I'm going to try and do special ed in 10 minutes. Not sure it can be done, even close, but I'm going to try. So in order to understand this process, I think you have to understand all the pieces that are laid into place. You know, the special education law came into effect in the 70s. It's called IDEA. And the whole purpose of that law was to find and evaluate students and whether or not they actually had a disability, and to serve them for their disability at absolutely no cost to their families. The law does focus on student rights and parent responsibility. They are guided by 6 principles, and I had to write these down because I knew I would remember them. You may have heard the term FAPE before, and this means a free and appropriate public education. Another principle it's built upon is appropriate evaluation done in a timely manner, and that's the one we're going to concentrate on a little bit more. Creating an IEP and its implementation, a least restrictive environment, which is often quite hard for anybody to understand, but especially for a parent who is facing their child being divvied out to providers and times of day and where they're going to be and who will be serving them. There is a huge principle in this of parent and the student's participation in their education. And last but not least, and probably 200 of the 250 regulations are all of the procedural safeguards and the rules. So that gets you the real big background. In the last few years, you've heard a lot about student intervention and how we are serving.
I think the storm might have just hit her house.
Designated as special education. It says it's unstable.
Yeah, you just cut out a little bit.
Am I back?
You're back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you're frozen.
Mm-hmm.
Can
Find.
There you go. You're good. Go.
Okay. In Kansas, the follow-up to IDEA is called Child Find. We are responsible as school districts to identify, locate, and evaluate students included in our district from the ages of 0 to 21, because the special education law does go to 21. So how do we find and identify and locate? Well, there are 3 really big ways, because they are small children when we begin this at birth. Sometimes it comes from the parent. The parent calls the school district or the special education co-op and says, hey, you know, my child was born with multiple disabilities. And the co-op starts the ball rolling because there's nothing to prove, there's nothing to test. We know that that child needs services like vision or hearing or OT, and those can all be done under the umbrella of the school. Sometimes it comes from the parent as teacher's representative, because they visit in the homes and they work with families, and they might say something to a parent about things that are going on with their child, and then they can help move that forward. Basically, in most districts, probably, it begins with preschool, because the child comes into the preschool and, you know, you've seen these sheets. Hey, today I learned the letter A. I can count to 4. Those are truly developmental and measurable assessments. And so the teachers have those kind of assessments. They'll see things like delays in speech or their cognitive development. They might have a physical development issue that's really not come to light. So the law requires us to continue the process until they're 21, which is the time we time out of special ed. Anyway, I can think of a couple of things, like with K1 students, we used a thing called ASQ, and the parents filled it out, and it was online. Some of it was check the blank, and some of it was they were asked to do tests with their children. You know, can your child demonstrate this? You draw it, they draw it. Some of them actually uploaded the pictures so we could see the comparisons. That information was pretty good, because if the parent said my child is shy and freaks out at loud noises, then we are warned before school ever starts. So there are really, really good pieces of child find, but it is state law and every district has to have a policy in place. The rest of special ed comes from special ed requests comes from two pockets. One of them being the parents, because theirs rises out of a concern of, I got another phone call, they don't know as many letters, parent-teacher conferences seem to be a problem, he or she's in trouble a lot, they have some cognitive issues, whatever. So you've got the parents who are thinking about it. And then on the other hand, you have teachers that have already picked up on it because they're spending 24 hours a day with those kids. So, you know, a lot of times first they talk to their teams, they talk to the counselors or come and have a meeting with the administration. They try some things. And when none of that whatsoever is helping the student, most schools have some kind of an intervention process already in place. In fact, in Kansas, they better have, or they're not passing any of those little check boxes. Most of the schools I've worked with, we've called them student intervention teams, but other districts might call them their MTSS process, which stands for multi-tiered system of support response to intervention, or just general education intervention teams. The teacher brings that to that team, which is usually made up of people like the counselor, an administrator, that teacher, a specialist like title or reading or math. We all sit down together and have a conversation about the data that the teacher is presenting to us at the time. That process can be very simple. We all sit around, and you guys know this, 10 minds are better than one. And when you're struggling with a problem, you want to call on other people. What would you do? What would you think? So we start what's called a SIT plan. And in that SIT process, it's a general education intervention and timeline. Most of those are, why don't you try this? And we're going to put it on there on the SIT for 3 weeks, and we're going to gather data. And in 3 weeks, we'll reconvene and see if that's working. And about that time, when we start putting general education interventions in place, in my experience, that's when we brought the parents into the process on a formal basis. They're invited to all of those check-in meetings. And honestly, sometimes those interventions require them to help us at home. So we want our parents to be that other avenue of support for those things. Here's a real good this, because this is a huge and probably the best educational cooperative director I've ever worked with, and I double checked with her today to make sure. Did I go out again? Okay.
Just a little.
Okay, thank you. A parent can request an evaluation at any time. They absolutely can. But what is outlined in federal and state law says the school can refuse to move to an evaluation, but we have to provide a prior written notice of refusal, and we have to tell them why. General education interventions may not be used. None of the data we've used in a general education setting can be used to deny or to delay testing. So we may say, look, this kid's performing great, but it's all done in the classroom. They've not been actually tested. They haven't been pulled aside into a one-on-one assessment. So we have this happen a lot. My experience is predominantly with middle school. We have a lot of kids, they become 7th graders, they're overloaded, they're out for sports, they like girls or boys or anime or whatever's going on, and their grades start to drop. And teachers aren't as forgiving in middle school. And so as the grades drop and the student does less and less and becomes kind of overwhelmed, the parent immediately sends a letter and demands for their child to be tested. Our observations are, well, he hasn't handed in the last 29 assignments. So at that point, it becomes a different issue, and it takes a lot of courage, which I could find occasionally, to sit with a parent and say, this is really a different situation, but we want to help you. And our general intervention SIT team will help with that. So that's when a parent comes at you and says, we're doing it this way, first and foremost, not to belittle that. I think parents think I got to get a hold of this, and I understand that. But I think it's also my responsibility as the LEA or the local educational advocate to explain to the parents why that doesn't work. And that's why I'm required in every single meeting. You guys were talking about how many IPs you sat in. I just did a rounded up count. And over the course of my 20 years as a principal, I had 520 special ed students. So it could be 3 or 4 times that amount, depending on what the students needed. And that counts initials, yearlies, and dismissals, speech, things that don't require a full-blown document. So I learned all of this information predominantly through IEP meetings, asking questions of the experts in the meeting, and knowing how to ask questions. When I see a parent's face, kind of do the, I'm not sure I know what that is or what you're talking about, then I'll ask a question real quick that is exactly what I know they want to ask. And then the teacher can explain that. So there's a lot of emotion and probable stress in a meeting if everyone doesn't just hold the phone and act like, we're here for the kid. And that's the biggest thing. We're here for the student. And does this student need an IEP, and what do we need to do? All right, I want to show you guys this, but I'm not sure I can do it, Julie.
I made you the host.
I know you did, but I'm still not sure I can do it.
Okay, let me download it.
Especially since I'm falling in and out of connections.
Yeah.
So I'll keep talking while she pulls this up for you guys. On the resource page, what I gave you were direct, to the very page, links for regulation, process, and everything. It's right on the KSDE page. In fact, I included that link as well. Everything is a linked document. You don't have to unload or download or anything else. It's all right there for you. There is an initial evaluation, and I want to clarify. Initial meaning the very first time. Keep going. Way down. That works right there. And then can you just kind of enlarge it? Thank you.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's great. The initial evaluation is the very first time we qualify a student, very first time. After that, they are called their yearly evaluation, which is required by law. So, and it all circles around one date over and over and over again. So in this particular document, what you'll see are the steps. By the time we've gotten through the SIP process, we have done the referral, we've informed the parents of their rights, but step number 3 is where the action starts. As soon as we have in our hands a parent's signed consent for testing, that is day 1 of the 60 days we are allowed for the process. 60 school days, no weekends. So for a lot of people, they say, oh, great, my kid has a problem learning and now they're going to take 60 days. I do want to speak to that because in some districts, like the last one I worked in, the cooperative served 6 districts, 32 schools. They had 2 school sites, and those are the people who can the initial testing, the cognitive testing, the general intelligence testing, all of those things. And if you can imagine the number of IEPs, the number of meetings they have to attend to, it's very hard to schedule them in. None of them waste time. They work like animals to get in and get your kid through whatever set of testing needs to be done. I can't say anything bad about that at all. They work very, very hard. but we do have 60 days for that very reason. So as we're conducting that, and I gotta find my notes real quick, sorry. I lost my place. There we go. So as we are conducting this, and we get down to this prior written notice is done, and we start our 60 days, then we go through all of the testing, which they work very hard to do. Then we have what's called an eligibility meeting. And I think on that, oh my gosh, on that diagram that you're looking at, it comes very close. So you got the consent, you do the evaluation, it's called an eligibility report. So what happens now is the parents, the special education teacher who will have that student on their caseload probably, classroom teacher, counselor, there's any number of people who could be in this meeting. That team, including the parents, talk about the results of the data and the testing. And then as a team, we have to decide based on 2 prongs, and that is that we must ensure that they meet the definition of a category of exceptionality. And because they have that exceptionality, they need special educational services and related services. So we go over all of that. There's a bunch of signatures. We agree, we disagree. And then generally speaking, and in my practice has been, the special education teacher has a draft IEP that is ready to go, primarily so we don't have to schedule another meeting, but it also helps because the IEP must be implemented before the 60th day. So you only have a couple of choices there for how fast you're going to work, and you got to get people lined up. And there's a lot, especially if you are a first-time special education parent. There is so much to learn. You're going to have questions. There are going to be things that we need to redo or think about again before we can move on. At that point, your child has an IEP. They are given a specific schedule. That IEP has goals. The goals say, this is a deficit and this is how we're going to approach it. This is how we're going to measure it. And by the end of this IEP year, this is what we expect your child to do. That's checked on quarterly with benchmarks and, as required by law, progress reports to the parents at each quarter. So there's a lot of paperwork. And as I finish up and Sarah starts, because she's got some good stuff for you, I know, I do want to talk a little bit about that parent relationships, partnerships with the school, with the teachers, and with me. I want to share that many times over my career that parents have come in and said, I'm so angry, or I'm so disappointed, or I'm so overwhelmed. And they have either already called a board member, or they've called the special ed director or whatever. And a lot of times I've been able to sit down with them and say, tell me exactly what your problem is. And because of knowing that problem, I've been able to say, well, let's go talk to the gen ed teacher. Oh, no, it's not her. No, listen to me. There's a place to start. Let's start in the general ed classroom. Let's move to special ed. Let's then move to service providers. And then maybe we need to convene a meeting for all of us because something's not working. I also know through all of that time that my best teachers to me as an administrator were those very same parents. I learned a tremendous amount, especially about dealing with children on the autism spectrum. Julie's heard my story about my boy that clocked a kid in the hall, and he was kind of obsessed with the law, and he clocked a boy in the hall, and when I got to him, he was standing over him and he was yelling at him. telling him what the rules were, and he'd broken the rules. And now you gotta remember, his mom had been teaching me for 2 years how to deal with him. And I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, "May I see you?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am." And we walked in my office and I said, "Hey, you know what? What were you doing out there?" And he said, "Well, I'm a little tired. I was patrolling the hallways." And I said, "Look, buddy, I'm the only sheriff in this building and you need to stop." And do you know, he never another day did anything that I would have considered punishable by school rules, because his mother had taught me the best way to talk to him was whatever he was trying to be at the moment. I didn't know that. I didn't know that going in. Nobody hits anybody in this school, says my hard-nosed self. But, I had to talk to him that way. I learned a great deal from the mother of a child who was severely, severely disabled. She was a mute. We had to take care of her personal needs, but she was a foster child. And so all of the boxes we had to check. So what I want to say is that I've always told people for a long time, there are three things, there are three legs on a milk stool for a reason. One of them is parents, one of them is school, and one of them is students. And without one leg, we can't keep our balance. So those partnerships, working with parents like Sarah, who have saved their documents, they have saved their communications, and they have saved anything else they need to know, and then they know what questions exactly they want to ask. Those are the kind of parents who are doing the absolute best for their child in a special education setting.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
Once you get to the spot where you have the meeting to determine whether or not the student qualifies, and let's say that the student does qualify,
Okay.
can the parent say, "No, I don't want my child in special education"?
Yes. As a parent, I denied it. We had we had Sarah go all the way through all of that stuff. And at the end, what they came back to us with was that she was, and you might remember this, she was gifted LD. And I will never forget looking at that school psych and saying, "Aren't we all?" Everybody has a strong suit, everybody. And so at that point in time, we were concerned about this situation. So we chose no.
Okay. So the flip side of that is, if you get to the determination meeting and the student doesn't qualify for an IEP, the parent cannot demand an IEP, but there are other ways in which the student can receive assistance, whether it be a 504, whether it be a student improvement plan. Is that correct?
That is correct. One of the things that you have to make really clear with parents, and the older the kids get, the 504s are really important to the parents. We saw a lot of parents in like junior and
Okay, it looks like we lost her again. So at this point, thank you, Vicki. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
We're going to move to Sarah, and Sarah's going to share her expertise as a parent on how to prepare for an IEP meeting. So what you got for us, Sarah?
I have just a couple of things, resources that I have found very invaluable. The first is Families Together. So every state in the country has a federally designated parent training and information center. In the state of Kansas, Families Together is our federally designated. So if you live in another state, there is another one. So every state has one. They are absolutely such an invaluable resource. They offer individualized support. They can be an advocate if you are struggling. You can have them, you can bounce ideas off of them. They can send an advocate to help come to your IEP meeting. The other thing that they do, they offer a lot of training for parents as well. So they offer a full day education and parent advocacy training. They offer it 8 times a year. It's completely free. it is amazing. You walk away with so many resources and so much additional information. They also have, if you don't have a full day to commit or it doesn't work into your schedule, they also do lunch and learn series. So they're 1 hour once a month. And I just saw that the October one is called Let's Talk IEPs. So they're about various different topics, but they are fantastic. And I can't tell you, especially, Vicki was talking about how IEPs are emotional, and I cried my first IEP meeting. You're concerned about your child to begin with, and there's all of this data and all of this information, and there can be times even with a great team that you don't feel like you're being heard, or that this is necessarily going the right way. So know that emotion is very, very normal, as Vicki said, in that. But definitely, if you're in Kansas, reach out to Families Together. I ran the draft IEP through one of their parent advocates on our first IEP meeting and said, how does this look? Because this is brand new to me. And they were able to give me some ideas and some suggestions. So definitely reach out to them or the other federally designated if you happen to be in another state. Vicki mentioned the Kansas Department of Education website. That has been a huge resource for me. They have a section specifically for parent resources. So not only can you read all of the laws, but there's sections specifically for parents on there. I have pulled the curriculum standards off of the website and presented to the school when I was getting some pushback on some things. So don't be afraid to go there. I have called the State Department of Education when I was struggling with an issue. So do not be afraid to contact them. Just asking questions. They're a great resource as well. Online, there is a litany of resources. There's one website I wrote down that was a great resource when I first started this journey called A Day in Our Shoes, Where No One Has to IEP Alone. And Julie, I'll send my list of resources to you after this as well. So, but that's one website. So A Day in Our Shoes, Where No One Has to IEP Alone. They have, everything from a suggestion for notebook topics to, sample questions to ask. But honestly, if you Google IEP, and whatever you're scared about, you can find a litany of resources available at your hands and just start perusing. Next thing is notebook / cloud storage. She was talking about the notebook, and this is my IEP notebook. I have both for my IEP items. I have everything from current IEP, the past IEP, the progress reports. I have samples of current work of concerns. If homework comes home and I'm like, ooh, that looks funny, I'll throw it in the IEP notebook to pull out at IEP time to reference if I'm concerned about something. I also have printed off in there the federal regulations. So if I'm in an IEP meeting and I need to reference something, I have that at my fingertips. I also have several things. I did the Families Together education advocate training. I have several items that I picked up at that in there. So just things that make me feel more comfortable, that I know what I'm talking about. It's such a big process, and there's so many regulations. I'm an information is power person, so I like to have that. But I also, I have a notebook, which I take to the IEP meetings, as I said, with homework samples, etc. But I also have every one of those IEPs, the past IEPs, the evaluations, the progress reports on the cloud. And I have it on the cloud on my phone. So I can't tell you the number of times I've had to pull up one of my kiddos' IEPs on my phone. So I also highly recommend, having that information readily accessible at your fingertips. Other parents are a huge resource. couple of different suggestions here. Number one, there are wonderful Facebook groups out there. One of my favorite ones, it's called IEP/504 for support and assistance. And it's a Facebook group, and it is full of parents asking questions about, okay, here's the situation, help. And they offer, not only do you have other parents offering support and suggestions, but there's also advocates who are offering suggestions and support as well. They also offer low-cost advocacy services as well. But that has been an invaluable resource. They also have an entire section of that full of resources. Also, I would suggest like parent groups on Facebook. So if you have a kiddo that has ADHD, or you have a kiddo that is autistic or has a learning difference, I would suggest joining one of those Facebook groups. And then I find that they often have discussions about IEP meetings or, issues that are currently going on. So I have found several tips in different groups related to whatever issue that kiddo is facing. Another thing, and this is something I have actually talked with Julie about, is parent mentors. I've talked to our school districts several times. I think it's wonderful. There are school districts out there that have mentorship programs. When you become an IEP parent, you are connected with another IEP parent who has walked this road, who has been down this before, and they will connect you with that parent. Obviously, you both have to agree that, you're interested in this, but I think that that's a wonderful idea if, districts would implement that, or other groups would implement that. Would be a wonderful resource for other parents, because it's a trying, very big thing. And then the other thing is I highly suggest you ask why. I have been told that I have been the only parent to push back on things. A lot of times parents are overwhelmed and they don't know that they can question things, or they don't know, something's put in front of you and you're told to sign it. Why? I hear you, but why? Tell me more information, or can you provide me more information on this? Do not be afraid to push back. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's my list. It's nothing earth-shattering. There's no secret, but as I said, I'm an information is power person, and while it's not been perfect for us, it definitely has made me feel more comfortable in this big system.
Thank you, Sarah. And I can verify that Sarah is an information junkie. If I can't find it, she knows where to find it. And her idea about this parent mentorship, that's something that we're going to try to build as the 802, and build ourselves a database of parents who are willing to serve as mentors in specific districts that we could help direct another parent towards. So if you guys out there are interested in helping with that, please reach out and let us know. Thank you, Sarah. And at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Betsy.
And now part 2. That was incredibly informative, guys. And it kind of brought me back to my kids in grade school and kind of the gifted program, along with a little math learning disability in my firstborn. And I remember those meetings. And I didn't have them on the cloud. I had them on paper, and I had all of them. And I cannot recommend that more highly, because then you see where you've been and you can then gauge where you're going. That's my 2 cents. Anyway, next topic. It's still related to families. It's still related to schools and school safety. For me, what got me interested in the Moms Demand group was Uvalde, Texas. And I think that probably y'all will tell me if your membership just kind of swelled after that hideous event. But to me, gun control is all about safety in schools. This month is Suicide Awareness Month, and also gun safety is about not having guns readily available to someone who's contemplating suicide, because their success rate goes way up. But so I'm not going to steal any thunder from Corey and Sherry, but I want to go ahead and introduce them. Corey Sherman North is an art curator and Kansas Museums Association board member by day, and spends her free time advocating for positive change with local groups, including Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense and League of Women Voters, two of my favorite groups. She and her spouse, Bill North, live in Salina and have 6 kids, ranging from 38 down to 16 years old, plus a first grandchild on the way. Corey's interests are reading, heirloom sewing, can't wait to hear about that, and test knitting designers' new patterns. Sherry Spare is a retired elementary teacher from Parsons, Kansas, and has taught everything from preschool to college, including teaching English overseas. She's nationally board certified in literacy and is a member of a writing group and 3 book clubs, including the Rural Book Club she started with other Moms Demand Action members 3 years ago. She and her husband, John, of 46 years, have 3 grown children and 8 grandchildren, including the honorary ones. She fills her free minutes with making quilts for family members. So welcome, Corey and Sherry.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I am so happy to learn about your group and all the good things you do. And it's an honor to be here. And
thanks so much for inviting us to this. I wish I'd known about your group a long time ago, having the last of the 6 kids in high school right now under an IEP. So I could have used this advice.
We've got a PowerPoint from Corey to kind of give her a skeleton to work from to tell us more about their work and Moms Demand Action.
All righty. So this slideshow will hopefully give you an introduction to the national grassroots organization of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. And next slide. And we all do like to look back and see what got us into this movement. And my story here in Salina, Kansas is the Parkland shooting. And here we see our high school after they reacted to the tragedy in Florida. And at this point, I had never heard of Moms Demand, but I believe donated after the Parkland tragedy and started getting phone calls and, emails from the group. So naturally became interested. The 17-minute walkout was organized by a high school senior, Carolyn, and she organized it, wanted to do the kind of vigil memorial. But, bless her heart, she was worried about somebody else coming in and possibly shooting her classmates. This really got me. It obviously still does. I'm sorry. But that was enough. So next slide. Here we are right after that. We had several people donating after that. And the Kansas chapter got in touch with us and said, hey, why don't you guys start a new group out in Salina? So here we are, the first group back in 2018. And we started doing activities right away. Getting the word out with community events is the best way to keep this grassroots movement going. Okay, next slide. There are many groups now in Kansas. We have all the big cities having their local groups. You can see here Johnson County, Douglas County, Topeka, Manhattan, Salina, then down to Emporia and Wichita, Winfield, and back in the pandemic, these wonderfully big groups all of a sudden became very isolated, and people, torn in different directions, not able to get together again. So at that point, we used our online Zoom capabilities and we started the Rural Kansas Moms. And this was essential to all our smaller communities like Salina and Parsons and Independence, who also then in the last year have joined with their own local groups. And so we have to add them to this slide and update things. Yes, and who we are, we now have more than 8 million national moms volunteering around the country. We're grassroots, nonpartisan, real activists, all volunteers, and we the main things we do are to work for passing stronger gun laws, better gun laws, closing terrible loopholes to make things safer. That's what we're working for, is preventing gun violence. And that's what everything we do is for. We love to work in our own communities as well on the state level and sometimes even on the federal level to encourage these better laws. And we will do whatever it takes to keep our families safe, as you all will. Next. Some of the things we do is we do advocate for better gun laws constantly. We work with other partner groups just like 802 United does. We work with League of Women Voters. We work with domestic violence centers in town. We work with NAACP groups in our towns. We work with veterans groups. We have friends working with us all the time. We are concerned with a political arm. We are nonpartisan, and we will support anyone who wants to be a gun sense candidate and commits to making better gun laws and safer communities. We have a separate arm completely apart from our mom's work, and we call this Be Smart, and this is our educational program. Truly educating parents primarily on secure storage and just best practices to do at home in wherever you are. And we will talk more in detail about that perhaps in the question and answer phase. Volunteers, as I say, all over the country and in our communities. Next. And we do this because every day we're up to 120 people killed. And now it's no longer car crashes, but it's gun violence. And that's killing our kids. And Kansas gun violence, just the stats from, I think most of these are 2020. You can see all the numbers of people that are killed and wounded, all the gun deaths that have been increasing terribly through the pandemic. And it goes right along with gun acquisition. The number of guns in homes has staggeringly increased these past couple of years. And that's, paralleled by gun violence with those guns, whether it be an increased suicide, increased accidents and unintentional shootings, or increased domestic violence situations. Next, and we have intent, as I believe it was mentioned earlier, 68% of Kansas gun deaths are suicides. And these are preventable. So this is a really important aspect to consider and really try to work against. So people don't even think about monetary costs as well. And we can remind our representatives all the time of the costs involved, not just futures kids, being cut short, but, this affects all of us on every level. Next. And here's the more precise stats on the kids and teens and getting a hold of guns. And we're kind of in the middle of the rates of gun violence in the state, but much rather be on the low end. So here you can see us out doing our job, tabling and educating in the communities. We love to do the education program, tell about safe storage and practices about asking neighbors before your kids go over to visit, do you have a gun in the home? Is it safely secured, out of reach? And even in parent groups, that's surprising, where you have people say, I never thought of doing that. And, I can do that. And that's going to be change, positive
One of
change.
your speakers really brought that home to me. She said, you would ask, is there going to be an adult in the house while my child is there? You would say, my child has a horrible peanut allergy.
Right.
And they're going to be exposed to peanuts. They're going to die by gun violence equally as much as they'll die from a peanut allergy. So it just needs to be normalized to say, are there unsecured weapons in your home?
In your home. And some people have to draw lines, even say with going out to their grandparents' farm, that can be hard too, because there's rifles and things out there that are not secured. And, well, everyone's survived so far, but you just never know, things can change in an instant. With curious kids. And, kids know where Christmas presents are hidden. Kids know where guns are hidden too. So we love to give out gun locks along with our safety programs and reminding good practices. So next. A lot of the activities we do kind of go in a seasonal type progression. We have advocacy during the legislative session. And then in the summertime, we think about National Gun Violence Prevention and Gun Violence Awareness Day, which is usually the first Friday in June. And so around that, around the country, around Kansas, you can see here, we just do a lot of community awareness building about the problems. We like to get city commission to give actual proclamations that are read and made public, and just to raise awareness. And then out in the communities, we're doing marches and parades and working with veterans and doing blood drives, because gunshot victims typically need 10 times the amount of blood transfusions in emergency situations than any other accident. So those are good community building things. And Sherry, you want to tell about your last year's Wear Orange project?
This past year, 2023, we had a fun run in the park, and these are our veterans. This is their picture. And we had a donation drive for our safe house. And that's it's always a service project. And it, like Corey said, it can be a blood drive, a donation drive for safe house. But the year before that, and Betsy, you mentioned Uvalde, I was the only volunteer in Parsons for a couple of years. And so I did a book drive on my own, because I'm all by myself. I can't host a blood drive by myself or donation drive. So I had people donate books, and I just put something on Facebook, and people just sent them through Amazon. I got boxes and boxes of books dropped off at my front porch, because I'm nationally board certified in literacy. And I know that shooters are not using their words, they are using actions. And if we can promote early literacy and reading skills, and maybe they'll go to school more prepared and they won't be bullied and they'll be more successful. To me, I thought that that would help alleviate violence. So I was able to collect 600 books and donated them to My Family Labette, which serves needy families in Labette County, birth to 5. And we set up a lending library within My Family Labette. And so I thought I'd get, a handful of books, and I got 600. So that was my project. But now when Uvalde happened, immediately we had 40 people signed up in my county, and now we have a strong chapter going. We had 1,200 people sign up in Kansas alone. So like you said, after Uvalde, that's when
after every tragedy, people,
after every
more and more
tragedy,
people
every school
join.
shooting, we get more and more people. Yeah.
Yeah. And people
I've been
don't quit.
donating to every town and like
Oh.
situations since Sandy Hook. I mean, I still get the emails for my donations to Sandy
Mhm.
Hook. So I go back 21 years to school shootings and just breaking my heart. I'm
Yeah.
a physician. I'm not an emergency room physician. That's my kid. I do high risk OB, but I have cared for pregnant women who have been shot. And you got a twofer there of 2 people that are now at risk. It just breaks my heart. And I can't sit on my hands.
Mhm. Right.
As well, you shouldn't. None of us should.
That's
We've
right.
got to work together. Speaking of Uvalde, last June, next slide, it was particularly poignant. Our governor, Laura Kelly, for the past several years has been issuing a state proclamation noting National Gun Violence Awareness Day. And we generally go to her office. Well, last year was different because this happened right after the Uvalde shooting. And so she wanted to not only do the proclamation, as you see at her desk there, but, meeting many of us Kansas moms. And then she invited us into her office there at the bottom picture for a real sit down and talking about what we can do. And basically it boils down to voting like-minded people into our Kansas legislature who will work for gun violence prevention instead of not.
Mhm.
Next slide. So that leads us into our advocacy work, which is constant. We are constantly aware of what's going on in Topeka during the legislative session, January, usually through April. In February, right in the middle, we take a day and all of us gather and go knocking on our doors of our senators and our representatives and present an issue or 2, not more at once, about what we want them to accomplish and why. And all these, here's all these moms telling you why we want these things. Some senators, like Senator Hardy down there at the bottom, they do listen to us, even though they're not necessarily of our same political party. And that is so great. But there are many who will not listen and will not go against the NRA lobby, especially. That's a real problem. I love this picture at a few years back because we've got a picture of Joella Hoy and then Tanya Boyd visiting a former governor. And then Joella at that time was the Kansas chapter leader of the whole state for moms. But her advocacy work and getting in touch and writing and testifying, witnessing in the Capitol led her to run for office herself. So next slide.
I have a little tidbit from the Gun Sense University Corey and I attended in Chicago. This is nationally. 275 moms volunteers ran for office. 136 of them were elected. And we supported there, and there were 5,000 Gun Sense candidates in the nation. So there's been a wonderful trend of our volunteers becoming active in the, in advocacy, and then they run for office. So 136 were elected nationwide, and Joella is one of ours.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
you can see Representative Joella down in the center bottom now of this slide. And this was this past February when we were able to gather in person again. And it was none. If you there, no, keep going there. Here we are. So although we met and visited and constantly are in touch, emailing and phoning our representatives, overall there was a narrow victory for the other side that was going to force schools to use the NRA sponsored so-called gun safety program in schools and not anything else. This is obviously terrible. It's, comes from the industry encouraging gun use. So this is the last thing we want. Luckily, our gun sense candidate, Governor Kelly, was able to veto that bill. So squashed it. And it's because she is always working for gun safety. She is one of our top gun sense candidates in the state. And just last slide here, next. And so we do have to be, as you all are concerned with voting, we've got to vote. We've got to get behind our official gun sense candidates who commit to making better laws. It has been done in Kansas just a few years, right before the pandemic. Kansas passed a law saying convicted domestic abusers may not buy guns. That's a law now. Next, we have to work on the loophole that says you also have to give up the guns you already have. So that's another bill that we have been working on since and trying to get that passed. So future, we will. And just last slide, just to say, Moms Demand Action considers itself to be a very inclusive group and always concerned for the safety of our community members. So here's the official end. And if we want to start with a question and answer period.
Sure. We have a few more minutes. We're supposed to keep it to about an hour, but I knew we were going to run over because we had so much amazing content. One of the things I noticed in several of your photos, this is called Moms Demand Action, but there's men in there. Tell me about that.
Mm-hmm. You don't have to be female to be a member. You don't have to be a mother. We have t-shirts that say man enough to be a mom. So men are welcome.
And I saw another slogan that said mothers and others demand action.
Mothers and others. Yep. And the name Moms Demand Action comes directly from modeling on mothers against drunk drivers. And so that's where the phrase comes from, Moms Demand Action. But currently we have 2 Kansas co-leaders, and one's named Shannon and one's named David.
Another thing that you brought up was that when you go to see your elected officials, when you're doing advocacy work, you really go in with only 1 or 2 points you want to get across. And I just commend that so highly. We went from the 802, we went to Washington, D.C. in May and met with our elected officials. And mostly we met with the staff and we're like,
yes,
tell us how to be the best advocate. And they're like, a 10-second, 18-second phone call is just as impactful as a 10-minute tirade. So making sure they know what zip code you're from and what your ask is. Hang up the phone. And most of the time, the voicemail anyway. But especially in person, they say, don't just come in and complain. Tell us what you need. Tell us what you want from us. So I really appreciated what you had to say about advocacy. I think that's terrific.
Tell them what to do and say, we need you to vote yes on this bill. We need you to get this bill on the floor. We need you to vote this other terrible idea down, which I should point out we did for, I think it was sometime after Parkland, when Kansas legislator as a body, I'm sure prompted by the NRA, thought, well, let's arm teachers. And there was some bills drafted and floated. But there was so much pushback. You know, I emailed my representatives and just on my own, because this is a terrible idea and this is why. And it never got to the floor as a bill, because going back to the ksledge.org, you can go back and look at all the emails that are now on file. And there were pages and pages against arming teachers. And there was, like a handful that were saying, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Go ahead.
More guns are not ever going to be the answer. Just say it.
That's right. That's right.
So that wasn't necessarily publicized. It was never came to a vote, but all those people mailing in and phoning and saying, do not arm teachers, it worked.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that the staffers told us is that though we're often encouraged, I get these texts all the time that say, will you add your voice? Will you sign this petition? I'll sign a petition, but when they want me to do a long cookie cutter email, we found out from the staffers that basically those are just considered, you're a frequent flyer. I don't really.
Yeah, that's junk mail to them.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right.
So they said a handwritten note,
Exactly.
really impactful.
Postcard,
Right,
perfect.
right. Well,
Or
Senator Hardy loves postcards.
I love that. That's so cute.
yeah.
Or
right.
an email that really comes from your heart.
Right,
Something
right.
you have
I'm
to-
sure.
I was on the
Short
I was
and
on
sweet.
I was on the political action committee for KNEA, for the teachers union, for 5 years, and they said thank you. In our training, they said tell your story. Like tell about your special ed child, or tell about whatever. Tell about your if you're a survivor of gun violence, tell your story. They need to hear your story, and not those. They don't like. I've talked to my representative. He does not like those cookie cutter, those cookie cutter emails. Yeah, so you're right, Betsy. Good point.
The other thing I wanted to ask a little bit about why Eddie Eagle failed, besides the fact that Laura Kelly's a badass, besides that, is that program has absolutely no data,
No
to
value.
support it.
Right.
None. And
It has
they wanted
actually
to
does.
unproven thing.
It does have data. The American College of Pediatrics, they've said they've studied it, and it has no value in helping. It's not shown to make any difference in a positive way. And so they recommend not doing this. And even though people testified with this information in Topeka, the body as a whole, the majority voted for taking this unproven pediatric college, saying, no, don't do it. And they just went against it. So thank goodness for our badass governor.
Sorry, I was muted and then we switched screens. Did you want to say a little bit more about the Be Smart program? And then I want to open it up if anybody else has any questions for you guys. I've been watching the Facebook page and I haven't seen any comments pop up. But if Julie, if you had an additional question, but I did want to hear more about the Be Smart program.
Sherry, do you want to talk about Be Smart and tabling at schools and all that?
It's good for back to school night. We've had
Yeah.
tables at festivals. We had it at our Wear Orange. And the biggest, if we want to make a point and be brief, is number one, safe storage. Get your guns locked up and away from children, where children can access them. Number one. I wrote a grant with our police chief to buy gun locks to pass out at our tabling events. And in doing my research for the grant, somewhere in this country every day, a kid gets a hold of a gun and accidentally shoots themselves or someone. And it happens. There's 365 of these type of shootings. And it is so critical that parents securely store their weapons and the ammunition separately. And that guns are stored unloaded, ammunition separate, and they are locked up. Both things are locked up. That's a big part of the Be Smart. And like you mentioned,
especially for the youth suicide that's been on the rise. We had a wonderful session recently, a children's hospital in Montana had suicide clusters going on, increase in their town. And so some of the nurses there, who are moms demand action related, they decided to implement the Be Smart program in their hospital intake process, asking the questions, every time anyone comes into the hospital, do you have guns in the home? Are they safely stored? Are you thinking of suicide, and can you take these guns somewhere else? Those kind of things as preventative measures.
That's phenomenal. I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So not only schools, but we can get to pediatrician's office and hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
You have anything, Julie? If not, I have one last follow-up.
No, I just want to let you guys know that I appreciate all the work that you're doing. I sat in on the suicide webinar your group did yesterday, and it is crushing to see those numbers. Very crushing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if our legislative body could take some steps and make safe storage mandatory, and part of the mental health process, it could save even one life.
Mm-hmm.
But I bet it'll save more.
Yes.
So if you have an audience now, not necessarily everybody's watching right this second, but people will come along and they will watch this video. Each of you, I would like to give me your one take-home point. What is your action item that you want people to do right now?
Safely store your firearms in your home. Number one.
Yep.
Because
and make
at
your
our table,
parents do it, and your grandparents, and your aunts,
yes, and your relatives, anywhere your children go. In our tabling, we would pass out gun locks, and people say, "Oh, I tell my kids, don't touch those guns. They know, don't go in that room, don't touch those guns." It needs to be more than that. They need to be locked, unloaded, locked, and ammunition stored separately and locked. Yes, that's my number one.
That's ours.
Yeah.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming this evening and just pouring your hearts out to us and giving us some facts and some, I almost wanted to say ammunition, giving us some facts to back up what we're thinking and like to accomplish. And it's just been a great conversation. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was so great to meet all of you, and we appreciate you and all the work you're doing. And thank you for letting us come on with our message.
Yes.
Yeah.
We do appreciate the invitation and spread the message.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, take care and be safe.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
safe.
guys. So Betsy, what's next month, October?
Mhm.
Do you remember what we have on our town hall agenda?
I
don't.
have it on a memo on my phone. Just a second. I have to get past the memo that was talking about what we were just doing just now. All right, it's down here at the bottom. It is, October is youth activism. We're going to try to get JJ Briscoe to come and be our guest. One of our other board members, Tori Gleason, knows him and is going to try to get him to talk about Gen Y, Gen Z, and how to get them on board. And they're going to tell us what's going on with them and how we can help support that. Wait, you're muted.
I muted myself. That's excellent. And as soon as we get all of our details nailed down on the October town hall meeting, we will have that posted. So thank you all. Thank you for joining us tonight, and stay with us in October. See you guys later.